As creatives, we can sometimes get stuck in familiarity. If you've been using an app like Photoshop since the very beginning of your creative journey, why would you look to try and swap over to something else, even if there's loads of things about the app that just grind your gears? That'd mean spending hours and hours learning a whole new interface from scratch, which would, of course, cut into your precious creative time. But if you're one of the brave souls who experienced swapping over to a completely different app, like I did when I left my 10-year-long romantic relationship with Premiere Pro for a much more sensual and respectful one with DaVinci Resolve. Apps, cameras, these are all just tools made by other creatives who think that their particular approach towards a specific art is the right way. But that might not be the case for you. If editing in Final Cut Pro makes you feel the most speedy and efficient, then stick with that regardless of all of the DaVinci Resolve tutorials that are flooding your YouTube feed. I think a really good metric to know whether or not you're reaching the point of maybe having to look elsewhere to swap over to another app is when the splash screen appears in front of you. Do you feel excitement and joy about the project that you're going to be delving into? Or does your belly start to feel with a bit of dread knowing that you're going to have to overcome so many software technical bugs and errors as you try and take the project from start to its finish? I started to feel this way with the video editing app Premiere Pro, but I just ignored it for ages thinking, oh, it's gonna get better, or oh, I just have to put up with this because I've invested 10 years of my life into learning this thing, so I can't just, throw that away, right? Until one day I just couldn't take it anymore and refused to believe that there wasn't another app out there that would reignite my love for video editing. It did take some time and exploration to figure out which software that I was gonna switch to, but once I did, I felt more annoyed with myself feeling tied to an app for some reason when I could have just swapped over and felt way better about all of these previous projects that I had to do in Premiere. Now, there's something to be said about old adages like, the best camera that you have or the best tool that you have is the one that you have with you right now. And yeah, there is some truth to this, because if there is a choice between getting the shot and not getting the shot, or practicing and putting in the hours into learning music production and just procrastinating and not doing that at all, then it's better to do something than to keep making excuses for why you can't start creating. I had this conflict with the casual photography that I put out on my social media, where I felt like in order to take really good shots, I always had to carry around my fancy Fuji camera with me. And I couldn't possibly take a shot on my 3-year-old iPhone because people would know the difference. They'd be able to tell the quality just wasn't quite the same. And it turns out that people can't really tell the difference. Unless a super big nerd is, really pixel peeping at the images. People don't give a what tool you use to make your art that you put out online. So I'd suggest you don't get overly attached to any of these tools, because you don't owe any of these brands loyalty, especially if they're not keeping up to serve your needs and make your creative work easier and more enjoyable. So now that I've convinced you that gear doesn't matter, go out, you create with whatever you want to create with. But now I'm actually going to contradict myself to say that gear sometimes can matter. And that's because for most people, gear affects the motivation and enjoyment of doing a craft more than it affects the output of your skill. Give an iPhone to a pro video guy and a 50 grand Arri Alexa package to a complete noob, and I can almost guarantee you that the guy with the iPhone is going to take way more interesting and engaging shots. But that pro is probably not going to enjoy the process of going out just only shooting with his iPhone all the time, because they've gotten so used to what a cinema camera can actually do and the menu and the way that they use it. They've just really gotten into the workflow of how to get the best out of their creativity using this tool. More often than not with gear and apps, there is a baseline of what the tools can actually do before any other improvement isn't actually that big of a leap. Going from iMovie to Final Cut Pro is an absolutely massive leap in terms of the tool set, what you're able to do, and how much you can flex your creativity. But moving from softwares like Final Cut Pro to DaVinci, that leap isn't as big. You can basically do the same in each software, but they're just approached in pretty different ways. So as you're using a piece of software more and more, you can come to the decision yourself as to whether or not you're ready to take the next step and invest to hop up to a more advanced version of the software that you're currently using. But lucky for all of us, we live in a day and age where downloading trials on apps is really commonplace. So you can very easily download it, hop into it, give it a try, and see whether you feel like you enjoy using it. Little tip, if you're gonna use this, download the free trial and then cancel it straight away, because you still get to do the 1 week, 30 days of the trial, and you won't accidentally be charged for the month after you've forgotten about it because you tried it for a couple of days and you realize, I don't like this anymore. And then the month passes and $40 from your bank account. No! And it's the same thing with physical equipment, because if you want to invest and upgrade to that new camera, rent it first. Rent it for a few days and see whether or not you like it, rather than splurging $2,000 on it only to get it and then be like, oh, that was a waste of time and research. Has this one feature or this one annoying thing that my last camera had that this doesn't have. And yeah, I just don't like it. I'd advise you don't do these trial steps with any professional content that you're going to be putting out, because it's going to take you a couple of hours, maybe even a few days, to get up to speed and get to grips with the basics of this new tool that you're trying out. Also, it'd be frustrating as if you got halfway through a project and then realized it didn't have one specific tool that you needed in order to complete the project for the client, and then you're basically screwed because you've edited half of it and you have to finish the rest of the thing in the software that you've realized that you really dislike. Ultimately, there'll never be a perfect app for anything. There's always going to be pros and cons between each. The better approach is to find one that just feels right to you, because it's more important to stay motivated for you to hop into an app to improve and experiment with your creativity. It's a good idea to look out for how much a particular app does software updates, because that's going to give you a good indicator of how committed they are to improving things within the software and how much they're listening to their user base for feedback. Me leaving Final Cut Pro was a factor because of how little they ended up doing software updates in my 1 year of using it, because it made me feel like they just don't actually care about the app and care about me, the consumer, to improve my everyday experience using it. And yeah, even if you switch over to another app that you realize is amazing for you, you might have to sometimes fall back on the previous one that you were using before, because maybe you're in an environment where you have to collaborate with someone who hasn't been brave enough to make the switch that you have. But more times than not, if you get really good at an app and then you start banging on about it to your friends and fellow creatives, then they're probably going to be a bit more eager to try it out and see what all the rage is about. And don't worry, it's not a waste of time to spend these extra hours learning multiple pieces of software, because it's actually going to make you a way more well-rounded creative. The fact that I'm pretty advanced in both Final Cut, Premiere, and DaVinci just means that I'm a more valuable filmmaker. And I've had projects in the past where I've collaborated with other editors and we needed to open up an old Final Cut Pro project, and one of the editors who got it didn't know his way around it. So I was very much like, hey, I know my way around it. So I was able to open it, do the changes and export it, and I made a better impression because of that. And honestly, sometimes it's just really nice to try out a different tool for a change, to make things feel a little bit fresh in whatever creative pursuit that you're doing. I'm an Ableton Live user whenever I'm doing my hobby of music production, but I went in FL Studio just to get a feel for what it was like for all of these artists that I really admire who use this software exclusively, what it was like to be looking at the same screen that they must have spent hundreds and hundreds of hours in to eventually make the music that is so important to me. I am guilty of consuming and constantly researching content when I'm considering whether or not to upgrade or buy a new piece of camera gear, because I want to make sure that my hard-earned cash goes towards purchasing something that is the best for me. But I think I've realized now that a lot of this time that I put into researching, it's kind of a leftover habit that came from when I didn't have a lot of money and I needed to make sure that the purchase that I was going to do was the correct one, because if I bought something and then I didn't like it, I was going to have to pay like shipping costs to ship it back or just waste a lot of time. I've also sometimes waited for gear thinking, oh, what if a Mark II comes out? I don't want to just buy this fancy microphone when they're likely to release an updated version the year after. But what I've come to realize about this is that if you buy something, let's say this thing costs $100 and then you use it for 6 months before the Mark II upgraded version comes out, and then you purchase this one and then you sell your old thing for $60, that means that you've essentially rented this piece of gear out for $40 for the 6-month period until the new Mark II version came out. And it wasn't a complete waste of money, because as long as it helped you to make and be creative, then I feel like it would have been totally worth that $40. But yeah, this whole gear acquisition syndrome, or the desire to want to research the next update, the next thing, something that I really enjoy doing, but I ultimately know that it's kind of a waste of time. Like even recently, Ableton 12 just got announced and I was probably wasted an hour or two watching reviews about the new features that it's going to have. And when in reality, I know that I don't actually need it. Yeah, it might make my workflow a little bit more enjoyable whenever I go in to make music, but it's kind of an excuse because I don't need that to make good music or be a good musician or to learn the skills required for that. And instead I feel like, oh, if I just pay for this upgrade, if I just pay for this thing, then it'll make everything easier. So you've got to be really, really careful because yes, there are some upgrades, some gear changes and tool changes that will make your life a lot easier and will reduce a lot of the friction that you're going to get between you and doing the creating. But you can fall into a pattern of thinking that every single upgrade, tool change, whatever it may be, that is the thing that's going to solve the procrastination that you've been facing, when in reality it won't, and it's just something more mental that you have to deal with, something more mindset discipline that you have to really focus on to get to a place where it doesn't actually matter that much what tool you use to start making something. I say that, but then I'm completely lit by aperture lights that can all be controlled via a phone. But look, that light, it's gone. And then this one, that's my hair light. Look, I'm just doing it with this. Whoa, that's my key light, that's gone. I don't need all of this to make a YouTube video, and my early videos didn't have any of this, but I have to admit, it is pretty cool that you can just go, boop, bye. Even with YouTube writing, I often delude myself that, I need the situation to be perfect. I need to be sat for an hour, have a dedicated hour where I'm in my office, coffee in hand, hands above the keyboard, ready to write my next YouTube script. When in reality, if I am traveling on a bus for 5 minutes, there's no reason why I can't pull out my phone to make some incremental progress towards my next script. I know it's really, really hard. I personally struggle quite a lot with all of these situations and so many temptations of thinking I need this thing and I need that thing, and when I have that thing, then I'll be able to do X, Y, and Z. But if you're able to really build up, the mental muscle, the mental discipline for not needing or feeling like you need, this next app update, this next tool that this creator has that you think is going to be the solution to all your friction of wanting to be a creative and do your creative craft, then I feel like you're just going to make way more than anybody else ever would, because you're not relying on external factors in your situation to be perfect in order to just get out there and make some serious progress on the creative projects, the creative pursuits, the creative skill sets that you really want to build, and feel really proud of yourself for pushing through a lot of that very, very tricky mental discipline and struggles that all of us face from day to day. If you like this video, you'll probably also like to know what my 7 essential creative apps are, because you can just watch this video and then you can save loads of time not having to research them for yourself. Hit that subscribe button, because if you do, I'm gonna make the app that I know you've all been waiting for, inspirational Adam Grasso quotes. I know you've been craving. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next video.